Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning. I'm honored to speak to you this morning, and I'd like to thank Braun Safety as well as GeoPoint Partners for this opportunity as well. But thank you for your interest in traffic safety and driving safety. I've had a passion for it for 33 years. I actually started as a police officer in Casper, Wyoming before I joined the State Patrol. I just retired last year as chief of the State Patrol. But my passion rises from the fact that I see dead people. I see them every night because over the years of being in the State Patrol, I investigated hundreds of fatal crashes. My psychiatrist, if I had one, and I probably should, would tell you that I'm also paranoid, and so am I. But all that said, this remains a passion of mine, and I've been with EnCana Natural Gas for a year now, developing driving safety programs for that fine organization. And one of our tools in our toolbox is an in-vehicle monitoring system. We happen to use the Cartosite one. David Armitage spoke about the partnership that EnCana had with Cartosite, with the city of Denver, in the development of this device as the science project that originally occurred. It's one tool in our toolbox. We've talked about training today. We've talked about some of the legal issues. We talked about motor vehicle record checks, the driver's license checks, all elements of a driving program. I brought a few brochures with me today from the Colorado Department of Transportation, State Patrol, about DUI. Talked a little bit about that, distracted driving stuff, teen driving, a multitude of different things. But today I want to talk primarily about this, but I would be happy to entertain questions on any of those various issues. I am responsible in the state of Colorado for raising the traffic fines 2 years ago. I wrote that legislation. I also wrote the legislation for the graduated driver's licensing laws that the state of Colorado has, where we require teen drivers to have 50 hours of training or nighttime driving, or driving, 10 of that being nighttime driving. But also, if they want to get their permit earlier, the incentive to get their permit at 15 and a half, they have to take a 4-hour driver training course. Because like most of you, there has been darn little driver training provided formally to our young drivers. Most learn from their parents, who may not have learned from a credible driving instructor. Maybe some of you in here have been through a formal driving course prior to your employment. But in general today, as I've found, most driver training is provided by conscientious companies. So with that, I will move forward here really quickly. And I have such a passion for this that I have a tendency to talk a lot about and for a long time. In fact, my troopers have told me since I retired I could take a 5-minute subject on traffic safety and talk about it for 2 or 3 hours. And they didn't tell me that before I retired, obviously, as chief. And background. We started with the water haulers, particularly because in the Wyoming area, we had a real issue with dumping of water, and we were getting attributed as the company that was causing that. So we developed a technology that we employed in our water haulers whereby we could track those water hauler operations. In January through March this year, we rolled it out to all of our fleet vehicles within our entire fleet, about 700 pickup trucks primarily within EnCana's fleet, with a focus on safety. MVI rates, rates of workers' comp, cost, time, loss of productivity, all of those factors came into play in our decision making, just as it is with yours and what you've heard here today about implementing an in-vehicle monitoring system. Began our pilot in Green River and the Wind River in 2007. We bounced it out with an RFP in our Jonah, Wyoming, and Piceance Basin, DJ basins here on the Front Range in 2008 with all of the water haulers. We provide those regulatory agencies with verifiable proof of compliance. We know where our vehicles are when they're hauling water. We know that we're not the ones dumping the water in some cases. It might be some other company. We can at least prove that it's not us because we weren't there. That's how valuable the data is for us. But our primary focus, as I mentioned, is safety. It's been talked about, distracted driving, speeding. Those are the major causes of crashes in the U.S. today. The major type of crash that you're facing, that we're all facing, in the United States today, statistically, is one vehicle, usually a pickup truck, runs off the road, overturns, pitches out the driver. That's the number one type of fatal traffic crash in the U.S., as well as Colorado, Wyoming, the western states in the U.S. today. And these are the things that cause it: speeding, distraction, inexperience, you name it. That's what's happening. It's a win-win for both the operator and as well as the company, obviously. 15% reduction in our fuel consumption was realized in our pilot, and a 10% reduction in emissions. That's part of that science project. And that was the basis for us moving forward with our program within EnCana. And you can see over there a 35% reduction in idling time. We're now in the throes of investigating or analyzing the data that we've had since we started this pilot 6 months ago with our idling time. But we anticipate that this pays for itself by reducing our fuel consumption and our overall costs. I can tell you that our crashes have gone down, and I'll address that in just a minute. As I said, a division-wide implementation. We operate in 6 states. A scorecard is emailed to the driver each week, gives them their score on the various factors: the speeding, the hard braking, the rapid acceleration, the idling time, as well as their exposure, nighttime driving. 4 times higher at night your chance of getting in an accident as opposed to daylight hours. And of course our miles per gallon, which we're very conscientious of. And supervisors also get those reports on their subordinates. And they can log on to the Cartosite website and pull up information, more detailed, specific locations the vehicles been throughout the day, and actually throughout the week and the month. So we think it's a very dynamic thing. And as David said, it takes about 10 seconds. I think it takes about 5 to plug this device in. No wires, no antennas. It's very robust data collection. We rated those things based on the categories that we saw in our data. Speeding being the number one cause, it's 40% of our score. The hard braking, which is an indication of distracted driving, or following too closely, as our number 2 at 30. Then the rapid acceleration, aggressive driving type stuff at 20, and idling at 10. So, example of the scorecard and why we think it's so valuable for us. It gives us a trend over the time there. And our specifics: over speed, over 75, because we have a lot of travel on the interstate highways, obviously. We do have the capability of creating a geofence. We're looking at doing that in our Jonah field because it's BLM land. We have this 25 mile per hour maximum. We can limit speeds of vehicles in there to report if it's exceeded within that fenced area. That tells us we've got somebody that needs to have a conversation about their driving behavior. They're not in compliance with the established speed limits on that particular area, that particular work field. So that's the number one cause of crashes in the U.S. But distraction, cell phone use, fast, and soon to overtake speeding is the number one cause for crashes. Hard braking, obviously, as I mentioned, distracted driving, but also following too closely. Rapid acceleration, the aggressive driving, then the idling events. Economic, environmental impact, obviously. We're all concerned about that. We breathe the air, our children breathe the air, we drink the water. And of course the cost savings: 5 minutes of idling wastes a 1 ounce cup of fuel. So that's pretty significant when you consider we drive almost 20 million miles a year with our fleet of 700 vehicles. Your company may be bigger, and you can realize much more greater cost savings too. Here's what we're doing currently. We developed a guideline, so we use this. We had to be concerned about the big brother aspect of a program such as this, and it is somewhat. But just about everything we need to do in the liability arena is probably considered big brother. You're going to run MVR checks on your drivers? You should. Absolutely. I agreed with Dan Kaplis 100%. With Tim Batts, he talked about it. Anybody's talked about that? You need to know if your drivers have driver's licenses, if they're getting violations. It's your company. It's your equipment. You're responsible. You share that liability, a big portion of it. They're going to come after you. So the same thing with this. Big brother aspect, concern, so we made it really incentive-based. Create incentives around getting good scores and lessen the impact of the remedial. Nobody's been terminated for getting low scores. A lot of awards have been given for getting good scores instead. So, performance trends, as David mentioned too, we look at behavioral patterns. We've seen scores increase. And that indicates to me not only that this is making an impact to us as a company, but to traffic safety in general in our state and in our country. We all experience the drivers out there. We're doing our part, I believe, to create a safer environment for our drivers, but also for the people that we share the road with. We all have that social responsibility. You ever think about it when you're driving down the road? Everybody that's coming at you, you're entrusting your life in their hands. You expect them to be sober. You expect them not to be distracted. You expect them to know the rules of the road. And if they don't, they can take your life away from you. And they have that right to expect that from each of us. So we have a social contract with each other every time we get out on the highway and drive. And we need to uphold our end of it as employers and as drivers ourselves and as companies, responsible companies. So, some of our benefits, obviously a healthier, safer, more productive workforce. We have a friendly competition. We have our preliminary data at a 5 to 10% reduction in our employee-involved MVIs so far. So that's a real positive. And you can attach some figures to that based on the national standards. Even a minor property damage accident runs upwards of $10,000 to $12,000 because of the time involved and all the things that have to take place. Reduce costs, our fuel consumption, our data spending. Reducing our company liability. As Dan Kaplis mentioned, they're looking for chinks in your armor. And if they find a gap in your driving safety program, you are going to be held liable. And how many zeros do you put on that check if one of your employees injures or kills somebody in a tragic crash? So that liability is an important aspect. Of course, the CO2 emissions, the green technology. That's important, as we all agree. And improved positive public perception. So important in the oil and gas industry. We have enough negative about our industry, but all of us, our industries suffer when we have bad actors out there doing things, not upholding that social contract, living up to that standard that the public expects of companies, especially companies that hold themselves to be a level above others or as being socially responsible companies. And of course, accountability to the regulatory agency reporting. Bottom line for us is we want our employees to meet this objective every day. We want to create that culture of safety. We want them to understand that social contract that they have, not only for themselves, but for every other driver out there. And I often ask our drivers, write down the 5 most important people in your life. Think about this for a minute. Write down the 5 most important people in your life. Take a couple seconds to do that. And many people list their father, their mother, their husband, their wife, their children, their grandchildren, a close friend, a significant other. Maybe 1% will write down me because we fail to recognize how important we are to others as well. The impacts on our families, those people we care about and that care about us, if we don't go home safely to them, if we're not there as the primary breadwinner or the secondary breadwinner or as the comforter or as the caretaker, whatever the role that we each have in our lives is extremely important to other people. And when we're not there because of some poor judgment, some mistake, some violation of that social contract, that's the result. We don't go home safely to our family and more people suffer. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you.